So should you see the next twisted story from Jordan Peele? Yep or nope? Let's talk about Nope. Hey everyone, this is David Starr from Watch or Pass, and I'm talking to you about Nope, which comes to theaters on July 22nd, 2022. It is the next twisted tale from Jordan Peele, who I'm sure you're aware wrote and directed Get Out and Us. And now we have Nope, which is described as an expansive horror epic. It is definitely a horror film. It has some horror elements. It also has a lot of interesting comedy aspects, Americana aspects. It is a strange film, and you know what? It is something to experience. My hot take is I think you should rent it ultimately. It is an interesting cinematic experience from Jordan Peele, but it also feels like there are a lot of ideas here that are a little jumbled together. Look, maybe I just didn't get it. Maybe I didn't understand the full meaning of this movie. And it is something I overall enjoyed, but I left with kind of a, not super excited feeling. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about why. But first, I'm going to tell you a little more about the film, a few things I liked, a few things I didn't like, and go into the ending. So as you can imagine, there will be spoilers in the ending section. If you don't want to know what happens in this film, and you might not, there are some pretty interesting surprises. There's some pretty interesting twists. Then I would turn it off at the ending discussion. I will keep it vague and spoiler-free up until that point. But when I get started on the ending, there will be spoilers. So in Nope, you have OJ, played by Daniel Kaluuya, who with his sister M, played by Keke Palmer, own and operate this horse business for like movie production. It's a business called, I think it was like Haywood Horses or Haywood Hollywood Horses, something like that. And basically they provide horses for movie shoots, commercials, things like that. They are up in Agua Dulce, which if you don't know, that is, kind of above the valley. There's the valley and then there's a valley above it. That's where Agua Dulce is, which is in the vicinity of Hollywood. It is a drive at this point. It used to be a little bit shorter. Now it's probably more like an hour, hour and a half to Hollywood. But they provide these horses for Hollywood shoots, Hollywood commercials, things like that. It's a very specialized business. And eventually some strange things start happening that not only threaten their business and their farm, but also their lives. So things I liked about this movie. The first is the sound. This film has really phenomenal sound. And look, if you've seen Get Out, if you've seen Us, sound is definitely something that Jordan Peele excels at. His movies have really interesting soundtracks. They have really tense soundtracks. And this movie is no different. You have great sound in both the sound effects that happen when strange things happen, but also the lack of sound. During some of the scenes, the sound just kind of like leaves the theater, which is a really cool effect. It's a really great effect. It puts you on edge because you know something's gonna happen. And then when that something happens, the sound just kind of goes up to 11. There's a lot of bass, there's a lot of loud sounds. It really kind of gets your blood flowing and really gets you kind of in the mood for these horror elements. And the movie also has really great music. I really love that the film has kind of like an older feel to it, like an Americana, like an old Western kind of feel at times. And the music helps to contribute to that old school feel. So next thing I loved is some of the special effects. I'm going to caveat with some, but the film does strike a nice balance between CG and practical effects. There is CG in this. You kind of have to with some of the subject matter that this goes into, but it feels like it is pretty well done. It doesn't go overboard. It kind of focuses on what you have to use CG for, and then balances that out with some pretty good practical effects as well. I said some because towards the end, the CG kind of ramps up and it kind of took me out. But up until maybe like the last third, I really, really loved the CG. I really loved the effects. I actually wrote like, I love the effects, and then I had to go back and edit and say some because of the last bit. But it really does a really good job of knowing when to use CG and when to use practical effects, as any good horror film should. The third thing I liked is just the strangeness. Like, this film is definitely going to have you thinking. It's definitely going to have you kind of wondering about things. You might not love all of them, but the film does feel wholly original, wholly different, something that, you wouldn't normally see. And that is kind of what you get with Jordan Peele. Jordan Peele is brilliant. He takes a bunch of different ideas and still tells entertaining stories with them, but they are entertaining and impactful. And this film is no different. It has some interesting aspects about movie making. It has some interesting aspects of race and challenging perspectives. And it also has some interesting callbacks to like Americana and like the Wild West. There are a bunch of subjects that this film touches on, and it's definitely going to be one that keeps you thinking. And the last thing I liked is the comedy. This doesn't have a ton of laugh out loud moments, but there are some very good jokes, some very good kind of situational comedic aspects to this movie. They will definitely have you chuckling. It's a nice kind of palate cleanser because a lot of this movie does have some pretty tense horror type scenes. Like, I was never actually like that scared, but there are some tense moments, and it's nice to have some comedy here and there to break that up. So things I didn't love about this, and I already kind of touched on it, some of the effects. I'd say the last third of this movie, the effects just kind of like go to 11. and they are still well done, but the whole CG aspect, it's a little over the top. And so I just kind of like didn't love it. I liked, I guess maybe the understated parts of the first part of the movie. I liked how it didn't really try to do too much. It feels like it kind of jumps the shark and the effects go through the roof. And that is what I didn't really love. And the second thing I didn't love is, look, it's a double-edged sword, the strangeness. I liked that this film had some strange aspects. I liked that this film had some quirk, but it does feel like maybe this film had too many ideas that didn't really mesh together. And for example, there is like an entire arc of this story that just doesn't really feel necessary. I mean, I think I mean, I guess in the ending discussion why that was put in, but didn't really feel like it was necessary. It didn't seem to contribute a ton to the overall story. And likewise, the last kind of third also felt like it didn't really need to be there. Maybe the last quarter, maybe not the last, maybe like the last quarter, last fifth. We'll go with last fifth. And the last thing I did not love is the ending. I've said it a couple times, feel like a broken record, but it did feel like the ending kind of went off the rails and just kind of like went a little too overboard. That can happen often in horror. It's not really a big surprise. You got this really wonderful buildup that just doesn't kind of come together at the end. But I was expecting maybe a little bit more from this movie. And look, maybe it's just me. Maybe other people will really like this, but I think the ending just kind of like went a little bit too overboard. So going to the ending, there will be spoilers. There will be spoilers. If you don't want to know what happens in this film, turn it off. So like I said, the business is operated by OJ and his sister M. And they took over when their father, Otis, played by Keith David, died in kind of a strange accident. Essentially, OJ and Otis were out kind of training horses. And then all of a sudden, like the sound and the weather just kind of like died down. It was this really cool scene because like it was windy and all of a sudden there was no more wind and all the sound kind of went away. And then stuff started falling from the sky. And one of those things was a nickel that just kind of this freak accident hit Otis in the eye, like went into his skull. He died after that. The kind of official explanation was it must have been like a plane that crashed or some debris from a plane, which never really seemed to make sense because it was a clear day. There was no overt sounds. There was no like explosion that was heard, but that was the official story. And you're just kind of like, you're like, that's weird, but what else could it be? So fast forward and look, OJ and M kind of live out on this farm in Agua Dulce. If you don't know what Agua Dulce is, it's like picturesque California hillside. So there's beautiful rolling hills, not a ton of green, but some green, and just nothing for miles. Like they are out here in the middle of nowhere. And so what they start noticing is strange things start to happen. And eventually one night, one of the horses kind of gets spooked and just runs off. Like, that's really weird. And so OJ goes off to try to like catch up to him, find him. And eventually, you don't really see it, but you hear kind of like the horse get sucked up into the sky and then move along the sky, and you just can kind of like hear it, like it kind of goes across the sky, and it's this like weird horse scream. Like, that is really weird. Eventually, what we find out, spoilers, is that there is some UFO that is hanging around OJ and M's farm, and it like, you can't really, it seems to like come at night and it will abduct things and then kind of like go back, and they don't really know what it is. It doesn't fly like UFO. It's like kind of glides. It's very quiet. It doesn't like make much noise. It doesn't like cause like a big dust storm. It just seems to kind of like glide around and then go back and hide. And it's very much like a predator when it's showing, which I thought was a really cool thing. Like, there's a lot of cloud cover, which when I was growing up in Southern California, I don't remember that much cloud cover, but hey, you know what? I'm just maybe having rose colored glasses when I remember it. But this UFO thing will like go between the clouds to stay hidden, and then it'll like strike with like the cloud cover around it, and when it does strike, it like whips up some dust so you can't really see what's going on, and then it will like go back up into the clouds. And it's this very interesting like predator like UFO. And eventually OJ and M are like, we gotta capture this, we gotta figure out what this thing is. So they go and get some cameras. They want to like, they feel like they have something special here. It seems to like hang around their farm, and they want to capture this footage so that they can like own this footage. They can be the ones to break this story, this like UFO story that no one has ever been able to do. They want to take the shot. So OJ and M installed the cameras with the help of Angel, who was a Fry's employee. And I love that they put Fry's in here. It really drove home that this is like a Southern California set film. And I haven't seen Fry's in a very long time. It was fun to kind of see that Fry's location. And so they get these cameras and they try to like wait for this entity to appear. Now, on the flip side, their neighbor is Ricky, played by Steve Yeun, who was a child star. He had a bunch of hits when he was growing up, and he capitalized that to create his own theme park called, I think it was Jupiter's Claim. And that is based on, one of his popular shows, and people can go there. It was like a Wild West show, so people can go and like take pictures in, locations that are inspired by his show. They can take pictures that are iconic for the show and buy memorabilia, things like that. It's kind of like a Wild West park that is based on his show growing. One of these shows that Ricky was in was a show called Gordy's Home, which had this like chimpanzee who lived with this family and like had shenanigans. But one day during an episode called like Gordy's Birthday, it was in season 2, Gordy just kind of snapped and like went and killed a bunch of the cast members, maimed some, and Ricky was the only one to kind of escape unscathed. And why this scene is in here, I'm not sure. I mean, it involves Ricky, so it kind of, gives some of his backstory. It involves maybe like a predator going wild. It involves maybe the idea that like we are trying to bend this chimp to our will and use it for show business, but it's a wild animal, and so maybe you can't ever really trust it or tame it. There are some ideas in here that don't seem to be fully utilized in this movie, and so there's this entire scene where you see this happen, and it is a rough scene. Like there are some pretty difficult things to watch, and I'm not really sure why that whole section was in this movie, other than to maybe give Ricky some interesting backstory and some like traumatic event that loosely relates to some themes in this film. But anyways, so Ricky and his theme park, Jupiter's Claim, one night they host this like Starlight Express viewing, and they have people come over, and the pitch is, we are going to see UFOs. There's a UFO that's been stalking this valley. So it sounds like Ricky also knows about this UFO that OJ and M have recently discovered. And Ricky also seems to know that this UFO is feeding on things, because Ricky has been buying horses from OJ and M's farm. They are on tough times. Ricky needs the horses to kind of tempt this UFO out. And even though OJ and M didn't know that this was happening, that was their business relationship. So during this Starlight Bonanza, Ricky tells the audience, like, we are gonna, have this UFO come out. We're gonna tempt it with this horse. And eventually the UFO does come out, but it doesn't just eat the horse. It seems to eat everyone. It sucks everyone up into this like UFO thing. And that's when OJ realizes that this thing is not like a UFO. It's not like abducting people. It's actually feeding. It is sucking these things up, eating them, and then like dropping the, things it can't digest out of it. And so that's why when Otis died, like it was just dropping like change and keys and things that it couldn't digest from its last meal onto the ground. And Otis was hit by a piece that had fallen from the sky, so it like had gotten really high speed. It kind of essentially became a bullet, and that was what killed Otis. And so OJ realized that this thing is alive, this thing is feeding, and he also at this point realizes that like this thing only feeds if you look at it, which is a strange requirement for this giant flying saucer-like creature. But that's what it is. If you look at it, it'll feed on you. If you don't look at it, it won't. It's kind of like, I don't know, like a Jurassic Park kind of thing. If you're moving, it'll see you. If you don't move, it won't see you. That's kind of the scenario that this UFO flying creature thing that looks kind of like a mushroom in the sky, or like an upside down cowboy hat. So after OJ sees this like destruction, he runs back to his house. The UFO kind of follows him. He eventually makes it into his truck right outside the house. The truck gets stopped by the UFO, and everyone just kind of like hides from this thing as it just like vomits all the junk from the things it just ate. Like all the crowd that were at the Starlight Bonanza, it like throws out blood and keys and coins, things like that. It is a really cool scene. Not really sure what the point of it was, but it was really cool to see. And thankfully, because none of the people there, which is M and Angel, who were in the house monitoring the cameras, and OJ, who was in the truck, don't look up at the UFO, they all survive. After this, they like flee, they get the heck out of there. They go stay at Angel's place, which is seems like more like the Valley, maybe Valley or downtown LA. And they lay low, and you're like, okay, the movie's over. They escape, they didn't get eaten. And then OJ comes up with this idea that he wants to get this shot. Like, he wants to make this happen. He thinks he knows enough of the rules of this UFO that he can have it happen. So they recruit a auteur filmmaker, an auteur like cinematographer to come help as well. And they tempt him because he is kind of like out there trying to get this most perfect shot. And they say, this is the impossible shot. This is the one you can't get. And that kind of piques his interest. So he comes out. So eventually they set up this like trap for the UFO. They get a bunch of wavy tube men all around their property. And so when these things go up, they're like moving around to tempt it. And they also they have eyes on both sides. So like the UFO will think that they are looking at it and try to like get those wavy tube men. And when it does that, they can capture it on camera. They also got this cinematographer who brings an analog camera, because the UFO, whenever it is around things, it kind of like has an EMP field, I guess, and it turns off all electronics. So as you can imagine, cameras don't really do a great job of capturing it when all the electronics are turned off. But the cinematographer, his name is Antlers, has an analog camera, so he can capture it. So they set up this really elaborate trap where OJ acts as bait on the horse. The horse has like blinders, so it can't actually look at this thing. And OJ knows enough to not look up. And so they set this trap involving the horse with like, OJ has a sweater that has fake eyes on the top, so it kind of tempts the UFO out. So they can capture the footage. But then right at the last minute, they release this like colored pennant banner that scares this UFO. This UFO had previously eaten something that had one of those colored flag pennant banners. If you know what I'm talking about, it's like a string that has like a bunch of little triangle flags on it. And it didn't like that. It didn't enjoy that meal. And so they realize that the thing is afraid of it. So at the last minute, OJ releases that. It like causes the UFO to not want to eat him and like fly away. And thankfully they've had the analog camera going, so they got their footage. You're like, awesome, that was exciting. This is great. They got their footage. Yay. And then the cameraman is like, Antlers is like, I want this impossible shot. I want to take the shot that no one can do. So he grabs a personal handheld analog camera and like goes up to a mountain and like starts recording and like looks up at this creature that sucks him up. And he's like recording it while it's happening. And he like goes up in there. And then it just kind of like goes crazy. I guess once it kind of gets a taste for something, it starts kind of attacking everyone. It's a weird scene because like, I don't know why the cinematographer would have wanted to get the shot if he was going to die. And also, I think his camera was probably destroyed, so I don't think anyone could ever see it. Maybe the film would survive, but it seems unlikely. So now this creature is like attacking everyone. It's like sucking up anything. It kind of starts to transform too. This is where I feel like it kind of goes off the rails. It like starts to suck up like their house and like eat all their house stuff, even though there's no food in there. It like eats the like shed that they had built to record all this footage and like safely record. It like eats that up. And as it's doing this, it also transforms. It like expands. It like billows out. It forms into like it's like a Final Fantasy boss transformation. It like goes from this little mushroom thing to this like billowing thing that looks kind of like an orchid that's flying around, and it has its mouth is like a bunch of squares that kind of like shoot like an alien kind of thing, like they shoot out from each other. It's strange, it's odd. I didn't really love it because it felt like a little bit too much. Anyways, all this happens. There's some pretty dramatic scenes as people are trying to get away from it. But eventually, OJ tempts this thing away. OJ and M are kind of like at opposite sides of this creature. And OJ realizes that, like, you know, M can't escape with this thing around. M's only means of escape is an electric bike. And that doesn't work when you have an EMP field from this creature being emitted. So OJ kind of like uses his horse to back the creature up. He like tempts the creature to get to him. He uses his horse to like get the creature to like follow him, and that gets it far enough away that M can then jump on the bike and go away. And strangely, the creature, rather than like attacking OJ when he's like right there, goes after M. So M is like biking away. The creature's kind of chasing her. The wavy tubing are like going up and then like collapsing around her as the creature gets close. So she has to like stay in front of it so the EMP field doesn't affect her bike. But she eventually makes it to Jupiter's claim. And she has this cool scene where she like, when she gets there, she turns the bike and like slides to a stop. It looks very Akira-esque. I'm pretty sure it was inspired by Akira because it looked just like that kind of scene where she's like going, then she turns and like slides to a stop and like looks back to see if the creature's following her. When she gets to Jupiter's claim, she like undoes the pennant banners for this big cowboy balloon. And so this thing like goes up. It's like this comic book looking cowboy that I guess tempts the creature, which is again strange because this cowboy has like a bunch of these pennant balloons on it. So you think the creature would have learned its lesson to not eat these. But I guess it's intrigued by this giant cowboy. And so it eventually is like, it like stalks it for a little bit. They're like up in the air. And during this time, M is like using this analog camera that is an attraction of Jupiter's claim to take pictures and to try to capture the creature. She wants to get that picture of the creature. And so this balloon is up, the creature's like getting ready to attack it, but it hasn't come out to attack it yet. And eventually it does. It like goes and engages this balloon thing and gets the picture, snap, and she gets that creature in the shot. And then the creature eats this balloon and the balloon pops in its mouth and like seems to blow up the creature, and the creature just kind of like floats away. And there you go. That's the movie. We also find out that OJ survived. After M like destroys the creature, she looks over. She sees OJ like stand on the horse outside of the park. Like he's fine. Oh, and there is a stinger, but it's not really a great stinger. At the end of the film, there is a thing that pops up that is like an advertisement for the Jupiter's Claim attraction at Universal Studios. I assume that it's an actual attraction that they're building at Universal Studios. It felt, I don't know, a little off. I was hoping for some sort of cool end screen, but this just felt, I don't know, commercial? I'm not sure. It wasn't what I was hoping for, but in any event, that is Nope. It's coming to theaters on July 22nd, 2022. Like you can kind of tell, there was a lot that I really did like about it. It's an interesting film. It has some really good effects. It has some really good tension. Has some great music and sound, but I don't know, the story just didn't really gel for me. It seems like some of the concepts didn't really gel. But in any event, it is an original story that will stay with you. So thanks so much for watching. If you liked this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you.